Some crimes are committed by human hands, others by something we cannot see. In 1981, inside a quiet Connecticut town, a murder took place that would shake the foundation of American law. A killing so violent, so bizarre, that the defense made a claim never heard before in a U.S. courtroom. My client is innocent because the devil made him do it. This is the story of a family haunted, a boy possessed, and a murder trial that tried to put the supernatural on the stand. Welcome to Shadow Tales. It began with an 11-year-old boy named David Glatzel. David wasn't a troubled child. He wasn't violent or unpredictable or strange. He was quiet, playful, and by all accounts, ordinary. But everything changed the summer his family moved into a small rental home in Connecticut. The trouble began with whispers. David claimed he heard someone calling his name at night, a harsh, gravelly voice. His family thought it was nightmares, stress, imagination. But then David described something else, something darker. He said he saw an old man standing at the edge of his bed, sunken eyes, gray skin, broken teeth, a spirit that threatened him, saying, "If you move in here, I'll hurt you." Within days, the visions grew stronger. David screamed at empty corners of the house. He said hands were grabbing him, choking him, pushing him. He woke up covered in scratches, deep ones, as if clawed by an animal. The Glatzel family grew desperate. Objects moved around the house on their own. Footsteps echoed in the attic when no one was there. David began growling, speaking in a voice that didn't belong to an 11-year-old boy. And then came the transformations. During violent episodes, his family said he would twist his face into hideous expressions, his body contorting into unnatural positions. At night, he spoke languages he had never learned, Latin phrases, religious curses. The family was convinced something had taken over their son, and so, with nowhere else to turn, they sought help from the most famous paranormal investigators in America, Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens believed David wasn't just haunted, he was possessed, and the demon inside him wasn't willing to let go. The Warrens documented David's episodes, over 40 demonic encounters, each more violent than the last. They claimed he levitated, that he hissed and growled like an animal, that he predicted deaths long before they happened. Neighbors heard screams at night. Priests witnessed the boy convulse and spit when holy water touched him. It was clear. The Glatzels were living with something far beyond a haunting. But no one knew. Everything was about to get worse, because in the final exorcism, someone else stepped forward. Someone who made a fatal promise. A promise that would end in blood. The last exorcism session was supposed to free David. Priests gathered. Holy water was prepared. The Warrens set up their equipment. The family circled around the terrified boy as he thrashed, screamed, and struggled against an invisible force. And that was when Arne Cheyenne Johnson, the 19-year-old boyfriend of David's sister Debbie, stepped forward. Arne had been living with the Glatzels, witnessing the attacks firsthand. He saw David's body twist unnaturally. He saw the possessions, the rage, the way David's eyes rolled back until only white remained. Arne wasn't afraid. He wanted to protect the family, and in that moment, a moment he would regret forever, he leaned over the boy, grabbed him tightly, and shouted at the entity inside, "Leave him alone! Possess me instead!" Silence fell across the room. David froze, then collapsed. The Warrens were horrified. Lorraine warned Arne repeatedly, "You don't challenge a demon." But it was too late. From that night on, Arne began to change. He felt cold spots around him, even in the dead of summer. Shadows followed him at the edges of mirrors. He heard whispers, faint at first, then louder. He said something was watching him, waiting. Debbie later recalled nights when Arne would wake up staring blankly at the ceiling, his eyes unfocused. He muttered to himself. He became easily agitated. His personality shifted. The Warrens tried to intervene, but whatever Arne had invited, whatever he had challenged, it had accepted. Soon, Arne started blacking out. He had no memory of hours, sometimes entire evenings. Debbie said he would pace the house with a strange expression, as if he wasn't in control of his own body. The possession had jumped, just as he had demanded, and soon it would lead to one of the most shocking crimes in American history, a crime the Warrens believed was committed, not by Arne, but by the thing living inside him. February 16th, 1981. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening. Arne and Debbie had been working for their landlord, Alan Bono, a 40-year-old man who managed the local kennel. Bono liked to drink, and that night he had been consuming alcohol since morning. By late afternoon, Bono became intoxicated and irritable. Debbie sensed something was wrong. She later said, "I felt it, the presence around Arne. It was stronger that day." Arne arrived at the kennel to pick Debbie up. An argument started, small at first, then escalating. Bono grabbed Debbie, refusing to let her leave. Witnesses described Arne's expression changing. His eyes darkened, his face tightened. He stood unnaturally still, as if listening to something only he could hear. Debbie said it was the exact same expression David used to make during possession. Suddenly, without warning, Arne pulled out a pocket knife and attacked. He stabbed Bono repeatedly. Witnesses said Arne had superhuman strength, and that his face didn't look human. Bono collapsed outside the kennel, bleeding heavily. Arne walked into the woods, confused, dazed, unaware of what had just happened. Police found him hours later. He kept repeating, "I don't remember. I didn't mean to. Something took over me." This became one of the most unusual murder cases in U.S. history, because Arne's defense attorney announced something no courtroom had ever heard. "My client is not guilty. The killer was a demon." The media exploded. Headlines worldwide declared, "Demon defense in Connecticut murder trial." But the judge? He refused to allow it. He said the court would not entertain a defense based on possession. Arne would be tried as a man, not a vessel. But outside the courtroom, the Warrens stood firm. This was not Arne. This murder was a result of demonic influence. History was being written, and the world was watching. The trial of Arne Cheyenne Johnson began in October 1981. Never before had a U.S. courtroom been asked to decide whether the devil could commit murder through a human being. The defense hoped to introduce evidence of possession, including David's exorcism tapes, priest testimonies, and the Warrens' documentation of the demonic entity. But the judge shut it down immediately. This court will not allow testimony about the existence of demons or demonic possession. Without the supernatural angle, the defense was cornered. Still, the Warrens refused to back down. They held press conferences, insisting the court was ignoring the truth. They argued that Arne had been a victim long before the murder, but the prosecution painted Arne as violent and jealous, a simple case of drunken rage. Witnesses testified about Arne's blackout, his sudden transformation, the look in his eyes. Debbie insisted Arne was not himself that day, but none of it mattered. The jury found Arne guilty of manslaughter, not murder, and he was sentenced to 10-20 years, though he served only 5. Yet the world remained divided. Some believed Arne was mentally affected, by stress, by alcohol, by trauma. Others believed something darker had entered him during the exorcism. And then there were those, including the Warrens, who insisted the real killer was never human. The case faded from headlines, but the mystery only grew. Years passed. Arne rebuilt his life, married Debbie, and maintained the same claim until the day he died. "I was possessed. I wasn't myself." David Glatzel's family never forgot the early days of terror. They said the entity left David fully only after it moved into Arne. The Warrens documented over 3 demons, claiming the final one was the most powerful. Skeptics called the story hysteria, manipulation, even fraud, a desperate attempt to avoid prison. But even skeptics struggled to explain the things dozens of witnesses saw. David growling in voices not his own, his body contorting, scratches appearing out of nowhere. Predictions that came true, Arne's sudden personality shifts, the blackout during the murder. To this day, experts remain divided. Some call it a case of misdiagnosed mental illness. Others blame alcohol and stress. Others believe this was the only time the supernatural truly entered the courtroom. The truth, no one knows. But if you ask the families, if you ask the witnesses, if you ask the Warrens, they will tell you the devil didn't go on trial, only the man he used did. Some stories fade into history. This one didn't. It sat in the darkest corners of Connecticut homes, whispered in church basements, relived by families who swore they saw the impossible. A boy possessed, a man overtaken, a murder blamed on something not of this world. Whether you believe the story or dismiss it as myth, one question remains. If the devil truly made a man kill, then how many crimes in history were never human to begin with? This is Shadow Tales, where the truth is darker than the stories we tell. Subscribe if you dare.